Dark Souls. Wowie zowie. It's the game that everyone and their mother has heard of and talked about. I'm going to throw my hat into the ring and discuss, in a relatively short amount of time, the entire lore of the first Dark Souls game. Of course, most likely the others will come later in different episodes, but I don't want to create a 3 hour long video. I'm content with this video being as long as it is already. Obligatory spoiler warning, by the way, for a 10-year-old game. Alright, let's get started. Right, so, as the kind old lady narrating the intro cutscene would tell us, in the age of ancients, shit was whack. The world was basically just a massive, foggy wasteland where nothing could die, and time didn't exist. Only two notable things existed on the surface of this world. Massive, everlasting dragons made of stone, and massive, probably equally everlasting, arch trees, which were also apparently made of stone. This world was vast, it was dark, and it was super boring. So that's why, when something suddenly happened, everything got flipped upside down. That thing that suddenly happened was underneath one of these arch trees. Something just kinda lit on fire. We don't really know what it was. But when that fire started, all the people living underground flocked to it. They dug around through the flaming debris and found 4 souls. Of course, with everything being super boring, they sat down and they played the card game. And bet these worthless other things they found called Lord Souls on it. Now, the guy who won the card game was a dude named Gwyn, some old Santa-looking dude. He got the best soul. Besides him, there were a few others. Some old hippie woman named the Witch of Izalith, and a big skeleton dude named Nito. And, I think that's it. Gwyn was a really cool dude with a beard and lightning powers and a big old sword. He became essentially God King of the groups that weren't the dragons, because they were still bullying people upstairs. Now, the Witch of Izalith had a bunch of daughters and probably a lot of men who owed her child support payments, though she also had fire powers. Nito was the first of the dead. Whatever that means, we have no idea, but we do know that he had power over death. Together, the three of them, the Powerpuff Girls, together the three of them began to unite and lead the other groups of people, and became essentially gods. At this point, things could die. Heat and cold existed, all that good business. Disparity, as it's called. Civilization under the arch trees was cool for a bit, but people got real tired of those dang dragons. The lords got together with the humans, who existed, and decided to fight against those big, mean stone dragons so they could live upstairs too. Now, Gwyn, resident cool guy, found out that Thunderbolt was super effective against flying types, but it's also resisted by dragon type, so this metaphor doesn't really work. One way or another, Gwyn found out that the dragons were really weak against lightning, and decided to take heavy advantage of this. In the meantime, the Witch of Izalith and her daughters burned all the arch trees the dragons called home, and when the dragons returned home, all bruised and bloodied and burned, Nito just farted really, really hard and killed them all. Presumably, that's more speculation on their battle plan, but the cutscene makes it look like that. Of course, for such a wonderful plan, how did it go off so cleanly without a hitch against literal swarms of immortal dragons? Well, they had an insider. Seath was born without the stone scales that defined the other dragons, and when he was a boy, all the other dragons bullied him. They called him Scaleless and said he had a tiny little dragon penis. Which he did, by the way. It's canon that his dragon penis is small. Look it up on Google, you'll see it for yourself. Anyways, Seath, bitter over his dragon micropenis, decided to betray the dragons and ally with the lords who were almost as pissed at the dragons as he was. And so the war was won, and the dragons were no more, except for like 10 of them. We'll see in the games and all the ones in Archdragon Peak or Dragon Shrine, one way or another, all the big stone dragons ate shit and died, at least for the most part. Alright, so that's the world beforehand, right? I'm not forgetting anything? I swear I got everything. Oh wait, hold on. Ah, right, back when the lords were getting their souls, there was one more, a tiny little man named the Furtive Pygmy. Now, the Furtive Pygmy was a shut-in, and he wasn't all that well known, but he had an eye for good shit. So he got the best soul because nobody else noticed. He got the Dark Soul. Wow, name drop. Yep, the Furtive Pygmy got the big name drop soul, and decided that he didn't really want any of this lord business, and decided to share it with his other pygmies. Now, once the Dark Soul was divided up amongst the pygmies, they got real busy and made mankind. As they made more of themselves, and taller, more handsome versions of themselves, the Dark Soul got divided amongst them as well. Now, this already pretty notably divided soul was divided even further as the humans did what humans do, and had gross, slimy medieval sex and propagated over and over again, further splitting the Dark Soul into little bits and pieces, now known as humanity. Now, once the furtive pygmy casually made mankind, he just probably shrugged and returned to whatever hole he lived in to watch VTubers for the rest of eternity. Yeah, we just straight up have no idea where he goes. During the war, mankind was deemed mostly useless, and were relegated to usually the positions of slave knights, or if they were lucky, silver knights in Gwyn's armies. Anyway, Papa Gwyn, having just won against the dragons, looked back at the men he fought them with, and got really intimidated. They were so rugged and handsome in their war-torn suits of armor. They might usurp him with their dashing good looks and charming personalities, oh god. So Gwyn decided to punch a hole right into their souls. Now this hole punched right into them is called the Dark Sign, and essentially acts as a syrup tap that continually leaks humanity. Soon enough, this Dark Sign became a curse. Once a human was drained of all their humanity, they would become a hollow. Once the syrup tap had drained all the humanity out of somebody, they would revert back to the old shriveled gremlins that existed during the Age of Ancients. Also, they couldn't die once they were inflicted with this curse. In the game, this is known as the Curse of the Undead, and those inflicted with it are called the Undead. So, Gwyn, having properly engaged in oppression, decided to get to work on building his empire, which would be known as Lordran. All the while, the main reason why the world was kept as it was, with people being able to die and the gods in power, was because that big bonfire that started downstairs was still going, known now as the First Flame. Thus began the Age of Fire. Wow. So what did the Lords do for the Age of Fire? Well, they all sort of started their own civilizations. Well, arguably. Starting with the Pygmies, the primary holders of the remainders of the Dark Soul. Gwyn, continuing to feel inferior to the face of the rugged handsomeness of these wrinkled little men on their stone chairs, decided that he would give them a gift. Big quotation marks. A city off in the middle of nowhere. Go, now, off to the Dark Souls 3 episode with you. Mankind would still exist in the nations all over, though, still suffering from the undead curse. Next up is Izalith. She would go underground and work on perfecting pyromancy, which is magic involving controlling the power of fire through one's own soul. She founded a land called Izalith, a creative naming structure I know. After that is Nito. We don't really know what Nito did. He just sort of went back downstairs, formed a cult, and went to sleep in a box. He's just sort of down there now. Maybe the battle made him lethargic, who knows. He needs his beauty sleep. Last but most certainly not least is Gwyn himself. Immediately after the war started, Gwyn got to work. He started out by giving Seath a bit of his soul as a treat, and started a kingdom known as Lordran. In Lordran, everything would be devoted to how cool Gwyn was. Seath got a building to hole himself up in and do totally ethical experiments in. He definitely wasn't going to try to synthesize peanuts and enlargement pills or anything. Nope! Richmond became Silver Knights, whereas everybody else got to live in the burgs around the area, slowly becoming undead as the curse spread. Once Gwyn had properly established classism to go along with the other forms of discrimination he had brought in, he started fucking. He popped out a few kids, one boy named... as well as a daughter named Guinevere who... Whoa, mama, ooga. Sorry about that. Right, and Gwyn had one last daughter who... yeah? I'm in the middle of reading a script here, bro, come on.
That's not a girl.
You're telling me they got a trans character in Dark Souls?
No. It's just a boy dressed as a girl. I think he still identifies as a boy.
You're telling me they got a femboy in Dark Souls?
Yeah, bro.
Well, hot diggity damn. So Gwyn popped out a boy, saw he had effeminate hips and snake legs, and put that motherfucker in a dress, named him Gwendolyn. So now we got our royalty. One strong warrior dude who played catch with his dad and made him proud. One giant sun princess with actual house-sized knockers. And a femboy who Gwyn shoved in a basement somewhere because he didn't like the fact that his son had a dump truck. But then, suddenly...
Oh yeah, that's the shit, bro. Son, would you like to go out back and toss around the pigskin with your old man? Oh my goodness!
What the hell? Dad?
Son, what is this?
It's not what it looks like, Dad. I swear.
Son, is that a dragon?
No, Dad, this is just a drawing.
Son, are you rubbing your cross spear to dragon pornography?
What? No, Dad.
Get out of my house. We will have no dragon sympathizers here.
And just like that, the firstborn son of Gwyn was disowned by him for being a filthy scaly, and went on to live his dragon fucker dreams in a random building in the mountains. Meanwhile, Gwyn wiped his name from the annals of history and went on with his day, with one less son. Lord Rand would flourish for quite a while. As a matter of fact, 4 kings in the basement of the area won Employee of the Month, and got a piece of Gwyn's soul. Good for them. Stepping back a little bit, so there was this dude named Havel. Havel was a cool dude, but he fucking hated dragons. One day, he walked into the Duke's archives, the place where Seath the Scaleless was, and saw the shit that virgin was getting up to, and got pissed. He started a revolution, an attempt to kill Seath. So Gwyn, now believing his comrade in the battle against the dragons had gone mad, called upon his 4 knights, powerful warriors under him, which included a giant named Go, who wielded a great bow, a dragon slayer named Ornstein, who wielded a lightning crossbear, an assassin named Kiaran, who wielded 2 poison tracers, and a knight named Artorius, who wielded a greatsword and had a really cool dog named Sif. They stopped Havel and locked him in a tower in Undead Burg. After that trifle was dealt with accordingly, Gwyn was on one of his rounds around the kingdom, and he looked down at that little underground fire that gave him all of his power, the first flame. He probably made out with it, but then he saw it flicker slightly. He then proceeded to piss his pants. News quickly spread that the first flame was going out, and being Gwyn, he decided to leave the problem to somebody else, and made a new type of fire called a bonfire, which burned away human souls to feed the first flame. However, this didn't really work. Apparently there weren't enough suicidal maniacs hoping to jump into a fire. It was at this point that the Witch of Izalith quickly said, "I have an idea," and made a new type of flame using her Lord Soul as the kindling, and... oh, shit. Well, things went wrong. The fire twisted Izalith into something different, and abominations known as demons began to pour out. Gwyn got scared of this too, and sent knights adorned in fire-resistant armor to fight them, known as Black Knights. They fought back the demons, sprang forth from Izalith, and now the Chaos Flame had taken over the Witch of Izalith herself. She became one with it, turning into the worst boss in the game, the Bed of Chaos. Her children were also transfigured along with her, though. Now Gwyn, seeing his fire dwindling, had a bit of an idea. What if the flame could use his all-powerful soul as kindling? Wouldn't that be a good idea? So Gwyn just sort of sent his kids a postcard or something and tossed himself into the first flame, becoming one with his one and only love and beginning the tradition of sacrificing or linking the fire to keep it alight. Gwyn would set himself on fire to keep his kingdom going and would burn for an untold amount of time in the kiln of the first flame. Now that Gwyn was out of the picture, Seath, who had been busy whacking his tiny little baby dick to anime women in his archives, sees a golden opportunity. He proceeds to slide into Guinevere's DMs and eventually arranges a hookup. How he did that, fuck if I know. One piece of art that a large portion of y'all have probably seen later, and suddenly there's a so-called abomination in the world. A half-lord, half-dragon known as Crossbreed Priscilla. Now the royal family was so afraid of this half-dragon child that they locked her up in a painting and had the painting guarded by tens of guards. Things were awkward between Seath and Guinevere for a while afterwards. In the meantime, off in the faraway, presumably lands of Ulasil, a bunch of sorcerers are getting real sick and tired of doing the same old boring stuff every day. So they dig real deep and find a dude, an old pygmy, who got real tired and accidentally missed everything. So they decided to wake him up in the kindest way possible, non-stop, violent, excruciating torture. They tortured his ass in a dungeon for an untold amount of time until they got what was coming to them, and Manus created the Abyss. Now the Abyss is the exact opposite of fire. It is raw-ass dark, essentially made of raw humanity. Now the Abyss consumed Ulasil, with Manus, now a big-ass monster, as its leader and father.
Now, the Abyss terrified the royal family. The fire was the only reason the lords were in power, so for the lords, seeing essentially its exact opposite would probably be a come-to-God moment. Except, they were God. So the royal family did as they do, and threw a knight at it for a while, before realizing something needed to change. So, the royal family consulted the 4 Knights of Gwyn. They asked if any of them would be willing to face the Abyss, pretty much knowing it would be suicide. Artorius tentatively raised his hand and said he would, so Guinevere shipped him off to stop the Abyss. Now, when he got there, he saw a bunch of Abyss monsters. He fought them, but he couldn't fight, like, 1,000 of them. So they overpowered him, breaking his left arm. So he gave his great shield to his dog and fought until his death. But he didn't die. The Abyss saw his soul as free real estate, and took residence in that shit. Artorius became overtaken by the Abyss, and would fight aimlessly until a random guy just kind of walked in and murdered him. That same dude then murdered Manus, and now once Manus was gone, everybody just sort of shrugged and said, "Wow, guess Artorius sure is good at his job," and then buried the man and left his dog to guard the grave.
Once that whole debacle was done, everything was cool for a while. But suddenly, those 4 kings down in New Londo, the guys that got a piece of Gwyn's soul, were met by a long-ass, wrinkly, gross snake called Koth. Now, Koth was Manus' advertising manager, and thought that these 4 kings could really use the Abyss in their lives. These 4 kings agreed, and decided, yeah, let's sell our soul to Manus. And the Abyss decided to take that opportunity, suddenly consuming the whole of New Londo, turning its knights into dark wraiths, and frightening the shit out of Guinevere, who just sort of had a chunk of Lordran sink into the Abyss. Now seeing the dark wraiths beginning to pour out of New Londo, decided to flood that shit, killing every single non-tainted New Londo citizen as well. Now New Londo is essentially a large underground lake, which is haunted as shit. A single seal prevents all the water from leaving the city. Of course, the 4 kings are still there, they wouldn't be killed that easily, but they are sealed and prevented from coming out. So at the bottom of New Londo lies an abyss, with all 4 kings looking completely identical, just sort of sitting in the dark. So now we find ourselves looking at human society, which we haven't talked about all that much. Let me first go into a bit more detail about the curse of the undead. Once a human becomes undead, they are unable to die and rise again infinitely. However, there is a caveat. If one loses purpose, they may go hollow. A hollow loses their memories and their mind, becoming a mindless zombie. In higher human society, all undead were treated like monsters. They were rounded up and thrown into asylums, guarded by tamed demons. This was mostly due to the rampant religion at the time, the Way of White, a religion following Gwyn and the royal family, which didn't really like humans or undead all that much. All types of civilizations popped up. Kareem, Katarina, Thorland, Astora, and Vinheim, just to name a few. Humans began to propagate and do human-y things for a while, but the flame was still flickering. Even Gwyn wasn't enough, just a burnt-out husk now. So we finally find ourselves at the events of the game. Only like a full-ass book of backstory. I left out a few things too, but that doesn't matter all that much. Let's get into the game events. Your character wakes up from what I can only presume to be an absolute monster bender in the middle of a cell in an undead asylum. A powerful demon rules this asylum, and one night, Oscar of Astora, a random knight, attempts to fight it on the roof. He doesn't do really well. He gives you the Estus flask before he dies. An Estus flask, which is an emerald flask made to contain Estus, which is a sort of liquid fire, is used to heal the undead. Now, how the undead heals by essentially chugging burning lighter fluid is beyond me, but he seems to like it, and it definitely works, so I'm not going to question him. The undead uses this new flask and some cool new weapons to beat the asylum demon's sizable ass. Now, after meeting with a big bird who is never explained, the undead is taken to Firelink Shrine. What is Firelink Shrine? Well, it's a hub for merchants, adventurers, and travelers of all types to chill out and rest, because the only hostile creatures are a mob of hollows like 50 feet away and a graveyard so teeming with skeletons you'd think Nito was finally doing something lore significant. Firelink Shrine connects to 3 areas: Undead Burg, the Catacombs, and New Londo. We'll talk about those latter 2 later because we're following average progression routes. The Undead Burg is a small walled city, aka a burg, within Lordran. It's populated primarily by hollows, dogs, 2 quite rude demons, and the Black Knights that have been tasked with killing them. Of course, the chosen undead does the killing for them, on both ends. Once they kill the Taurus demon, they meet up with a cool dude named Solaire, who's part of a hip new religious group, which worships the sun. The two of them have a nice long conversation about that big old ball of burning gas, and once they have a good discussion, they move on to Undead Parish, which holds a Bell of Awakening at the top of a church bell tower. Of course, to get the Bell of Awakening, they need to fight through its 2 beefy bouncers before you can ring it. Upon returning to Firelink Shrine, they find that the large, inconspicuous hole in the floor has been replaced with a massive, toothy snake named Frampt. He's the same type of toothy, phallic snake as Kaf, the guy that I mentioned earlier. He wants the Chosen Undead to go to Enerlondo and retrieve a big-ass bowl called the Lord Vessel, which should allow them to go to the Kiln of the First Flame and take Gwyn's place to ensure that the fire stays alight. Okay, motive established, but first they need to find the second Bell of Awakening so they can even start to go to Enerlondo. The next step in their journey is to go down to the depths, which is, for lack of a better term, the sewers of Undead Burg. To get there, they need to go through another big buff demon, which also coincidentally let 2 of the most annoying enemies in the game into his boss room. What a knucklehead. He should really watch out, or that could be seen as bad boss design or something. One way or another, the Chosen Undead makes their way down into the depths and beats up the Vor Dragon before descending into 15 FPS land, aka Blighttown, aka HELL! Now, Blighttown is a small settlement of wooden platforms inside of what I can only presume is a drained moat or cistern with a swamp at the bottom. At the northernmost point of the swamp is Quelaag's domain. Quelaag is one of the Witch of Izalith's daughters, who, upon being transfigured, turned into a half-giant demon spider, half-Victoria's Secret model. Her sister was given the same transformation. Together, they began laying eggs inside of nearby civilians. I don't remember why they did it. Maybe they thought it would be a funny prank. Upon having eggs laid inside of them, the civilians, being both simps and bottoms, were entirely cool with their predicament, and formed sort of a cult around the Daughters of Chaos. However, Quelaag's sister was not all too cool, and felt guilty about their prank, so decided to instead drink the egg juice from a few civilians' backs. This gave her a disease apparently called Blightpuss, which left her immobile and very frail. Quelaag began to defend her ruthlessly, killing any who dared come within the cave that housed her sister. The Chosen Undead was one of these people, and upon being attacked, saw it fit to utterly slaughter Quelaag where she stood. The Undead needed to do this because they needed to ring the Bell of Awakening Quelaag guarded. Once the second Bell of Awakening was rung, the gate to Sen's Fortress opened. Sen's Fortress is a fortress filled with traps, presumably designed to stop the deemed unworthy from getting to the wonderful city above. That very city is named Enerlondo, and is the unofficial capital of the world, where all the shit is. The Undead would find their way here in search of the big-ass bowl. The Chosen Undead must scale the cathedral buttresses to get inside and challenge the 2 beefy boys that block their way to the bowl. One of these guys is Dragon Slayer Ornstein, I talked about him earlier, and the other is Executioner Smo. We don't know much about him. They kill them both, or do they, and make their way into the princess's chambers to, oh my god. Here it is. God is real, and he has given me all I need to continue living. This is it. This is all I need. Amazing chest ahead. Booba is all we need in life. My life may be a short temporary mess, but Guinevere's fat mommy milkers are an eternal glory that I will enjoy up until the moment the last of my essence fades from this universe. Excuse me. Right, so this notably big lady gives you a notably big bowl, and the Chosen Undead leaves the area. Or do they? They can instead realize that flat truly is justice and shoot Guinevere. Doing so reveals that the titties were fake all along. They were an illusion created by a femboy in a basement. So the Undead now must begin his search for the finest bussy in Lordran by walking out of the cathedral and going down into Gwyn's tomb. Upon doing so, they can enjoy the bussy to their heart's content. Oh wait, no, it's just a mediocre boss fight. So they kill him, or do they, and go back to their regularly scheduled progression route. They start by going back to Frampt, who tells them about this cool new thing he found on the internet called Vor. They put the bowl in the conveniently bowl-shaped slot and move on with their day. Now they have to kill the 4 holders of the Lord's souls. Nito, the Witch of Izalith, who both hold their own souls, as well as Seath and the 4 King, who hold bits of somebody else's. The Chosen Undead can do any of these in any order, so I'll just list them in the order I said them. First off is Nito. In order to get to Nito, the Undead first travels past that graveyard and into the catacombs. They face a slight road bump on their way down into the Tomb of the Giants, which is a tomb for giants. It's dark as shit down there, but they travel quickly downwards in order to find just what happened to the big boner. They find out that Nito spent all his time sleeping in a box and parting with his cult of doomers known as the Gravelords. The Undead disturbs Nito during his beauty sleep and murders his ass, collecting his Lord's soul. Next up is the Witch of Izalith. Starting from Quelaag's domain, The undead searches a bit deeper, finding endless Ceaseless Discharge, who is the Witch of Izalith's son, warped by the Chaos Flame into a gigantic monster who is consistently in agonizing pain. They mercy kill that motherfucker and move on down into the demon ruins. They kill a demon pyromancer and the right hand of Ceaseless Discharge before making their way into the lava-soaked hellscape that is the Lost Izalith. After the advent of the Chaos Flame, demons quickly took over Izalith. They hold their domain over it when the undead enters, who quickly proceeds to run all the way from one end of the area to the other through boiling magma and into the boss room. The bed of chaos awaits him, an amalgamation of the Witch of Izalith and 2 of her daughters, fused into a massive tree bed and bump, dead. Anyways, after that one, we'll cover the 4 kings. Still residing in the remains of New Londo. Once the royal family flooded the city, the abyss didn't really go away. As a matter of fact, it sort of fermented. Sounds weird, but judging by what happens when the undead drains the water, yeah. One way or another, the undead can't dive into the 4 Kings mosh pit just yet, unless they get swallowed by the music. In order to dive into the mosh pit, they must first go to Darkroot Basin and fight through giant mushrooms before killing Artorias' dog and taking his ring. After grabbing the ring, the music will no longer affect them, and they can dive headfirst into the mosh pit, fighting the boy band responsible for the music, the 4 Kings, and taking back the portion of Gwyn's soul they were given. Once the 4 Kings are dead, this opens up the potential of Koth showing up and attempting to con you as well. He tells us about this super-based anti-Gwyn philosophy and hands you his manifesto. This opens up the second ending, which probably isn't even canon. One way or another, the final lord on the undead's hit list is Seath the Scaleless, holding the other piece of Gwyn's soul. The undead barges into his archives before meeting with the dragon face to face. After experiencing what can only be described as a taunt-to-get-bodied combo, they are locked up in a prison with their weapons, armor, and single most brain-dead guard in Lordran to watch over them. Needless to say, they got out and took the fight right to Seath, who was hanging out in his little lab with his penis enlargement crystal, before the chosen undead walked right in and broke it. The dragon, now filled with vehement nerd rage, throws a tantrum for about 2 minutes before dying horribly. Optionally, before finishing the game, the undead can do a little bit of optional area exploration. This includes paying a visit to Priscilla, and either leaving the painting or committing the heinous act of waifu abuse. Optionally, the undead can challenge the Moonlight Butterfly or go down to the prettiest area in the game and accomplish nothing by doing it. Fun times! Oh yeah, the undead can also engage in a fun to raid through time to kill Artorias and Manus, but we technically already talked about that. Once all 4 Lord Souls have been gathered, the undead can go down into that big-ass bowl and put the souls inside to make one bomb-ass bowl of chili, which smells so good that Gwyn himself decides to invite all nearby residents to a potluck at the kiln. The undead walks past the other guests on their way to the potluck and murders them all because they didn't bring any damn food. It's just rude. Eventually, though, they find Gwyn, all hollowed and backed up by a sad piano track.
ほう、向かってくるのか。逃げずにこのディオに近づいてくるのか。
近づかなきゃてめえをぶちのめせないんでな。
ほうほう。では十分近づくがよい。
And then the undead lights himself on fire or leaves the fire to fade. It's not really told which one of those is canon. Alright, cool. That was the Dark Souls 1 lore summary. Obviously, not all this information is accurate, and certain details are either oversimplified, controversial, or completely satirized for comedic effect. I know that Seath's crystal wasn't to make his penis bigger. One way or another, this video took a while, so I'd appreciate if you do, the regular stuff to support creators on this website, involving the buttons below this video. Y'all know the ones. Cool. I'll see y'all in like 2 weeks when I finally decide to launch Dark Souls 2 again.